Some of these are very critical. They're almost they're out of print. They're very critical of Churchill, some of those histories. But I will say this, these were very courageous writers, some of these folks, because they wrote those right after the war when Churchill, and they're Brits, right after the war when Churchill was a great hero to everybody. Now here's the German, this is the German history. This runs all the way back from before the Kaiser. You've got Bismarck in here, and you move up to the Kaiser, and there, that's Mein Kampf itself, Hitler's book. You know, I first got a copy of that when I was 13 in the Loudermilk bookstore. It was just sitting there, you know.
13,
and,
what year was that?
Probably 1951. I don't know if that's the original. I think my brother took it. He was bigger than I was and kept it. But I've got, that's the Mein Kampf that was published in the United States.
Why did you buy that when you were 13 years old? Because
it was fascinating. You know, here's the Mein Kampf, the World War is over, and here's the Hitler's own book, and you had heard about all these things, and it was sitting there, and Loudermilk's was an old bookstore, and we used to go down there and buy sports magazines and cut out the pictures, because they're big color portraits. They're magnificent. You know, it was like a portrait gallery. You had all these great ball players. But we bought that down there. But you got other biographies. There's Bullock's biography of Hitler. There's the 2-volume biography by Ian Kershaw, which is very modern. This is a fascinating book. It's called Hitler's Table Talk, and it's introduced by Roper, the British historian. And I read it through, and I am just, it's Hitler talking right after he's at conversations, he's on trains, and he's talking constantly, and there's different people in there with him, the general staff, foreign minister, others, and someone is there taking notes, and they transcribe all the notes, and it is just a fascinating study of Hitler, and I mean, he's a much more mature figure than you'll find. Mein Kampf is a horrible, I mean, just from the standpoint, it's not simply it's anti-Semitic all the way through, but it's in desperate need of some editor to organize the thing. You know, you're here and you're going back there, and it's it just is a generally bad book. This, of course, Shire's famous book. This is the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. This is the Rise and Fall of the Third Republic. But basically, this is all about Germany, Nazi Germany, and Hitler's biography and what his objectives were, and diplomatic. And right below there, if you can put that down there, that's Mussolini. I must have 4 or 5 biographies of Mussolini. And then there's a number of people talk about that Stresa conference, which is the one focus. Let me say something that you know, for me, this was, I mean, I was educating myself. For example, I was aware, we were kids, we studied the Washington Naval Conference and all those things. We had good history in parochial schools, but the idea that the British were that close to the Japanese, and the Japanese had been that supportive in World War I, and what the Japanese demanded at Versailles, and how the Americans pushed the British into tearing apart an alliance with Japan. I mean, Japan was not a benevolent power, but it had worked. And to tear the thing apart meant to alienate Japan, isolate them, move them outside the community of nations, whereas the British, because they were the Brits, and the Japanese admired them enormously as an island empire, they had a great moral influence on the Japanese and a restraining influence on the Japanese. And the Americans forced them to break the alliance. And to me, I mean, that's why I admire Billy Hughes, the Prime Minister of Australia. He was a gutsy guy. He said, what are we doing? We got the Americans telling us how to run the empire? And he had sassed Wilson to his face at Versailles. Wilson had said, when the Australians wanted some more of the islands in the South Pacific that the Japanese had taken and they had taken from the Germans. And Wilson didn't want them to have them. And he said, Mr. Hughes, are you going to destroy the hopes and dreams of the world over a couple of islands? And Hughes said, and he turned up his earpiece, he said, that's about the size of it, Mr. President. He's a man after your own heart.
We're in Pat Buchanan's office here at his home, looking at his library.
So let's move through that's all the Germans, and that's the Italians, and the French down there. Ernest May, the Harvard historian, has written about one of the best books, and also, what's his name? Alistair Horn, and Ernest May and Alistair Horn. I sent, when I finished the book, I sent notes to all these historians, and I sent them copies of the book that I could find, because I wanted to say thanks, since I've quoted you an awful lot. And I got a nice note back from him. He was apparently a roommate of William F. Buckley's, but he wrote wrote about the fall of France, and so did Ernest May, and they're just wonderful histories. I mean, Americans have some great And the Brits have some wonderful historians. Even, you can spot some people that got a point of view and discount that, but they're just, we've got some great historians. I mean, both countries do. Now, these are general histories of the British Empire, and even one of them is entitled that, the British Empire, by the best of the British. This is terrific. This is by Massey, Dreadnought. That's over 1,000 pages. Many of these are best-selling books. Here's Henry Kissinger's Diplomacy.
And what is Dreadnought about?
Dreadnought's about the march to war between Germany and Great Britain from about the 1890s up to 1914. Dreadnought is about, the title of it's taken from the tremendous new battleships that were superior to all the battleships in the world that the British introduced. Fisher did, Admiral Sir John Fisher did around 1906. And these battleships were so powerful that they made all the other ships obsolete, all the other battleships, because they could stay off further, fire heavier shells, and had greater armor and greater speed. So it was, they could slaughter everything on the high seas. And so the Brits started building, and so Tirpitz, Admiral Tirpitz, they immediately start building. And so the British started building 2 and 4 a year. And so, and Churchill was just before he was first Lord of the Admiralty. He was very anti-military in a lot of ways, because I think he was for cutting the military and things. And he got up and said, look, the one side of the House, the Liberals, we wanted 4 dreadnoughts, and the Tories wanted 6, and so we settled for 8. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that makes Churchill so impressive is the anecdotes, the quotes, and the brilliant lines and things.
I see John Lucas up here. Have you picked up his new book?
Yes, I think it's here, isn't it? Well, let's see, which one is that?
Blood, Toil, Sweat, and Tears, I believe.
Yeah, I think that should probably, is that in here?
Don't see it.
Here's his 5 days in May. He wrote a very critical review, but I don't know that I've read the latest. I don't think I've read the latest, but I've read a number of them. This is his biography of Kennan.
What are you reading right now, Pat?
But I think I mentioned that I'm very interested in writing about racial conflict. Both Arthur Schlesinger and Pat Moynihan said in the 1990s, the wars of ideology are going to give way to the wars of race. And it was sort of a profound statement. And then I read this piece in it's over here in one of those piles on the left, I think, in the Foreign Affairs, about this idea of what's coming ahead as the Western Empire, the European nations clearly recede, and in terms of population we diminish. And you see these conflicts in Kenya, you see them in Bolivia, you see them in Rhodesia, you see them everywhere, conflicts of religion, tribe, and race, rather than ideology, rather than fascism, democracy, Bolshevism, and all the rest of it. And you see these things emerging. And so it is, what is the unifying principle? It can keep the world unified. Is democratic capitalism succeeding? I mean, that's the American objective, to make the whole world democratic capitalist, end of history and all that. And I think that tide is sort of receding. And you see it even in our own, but even in our politics. Issues of race and ethnicity constantly coming to the fore and broiling us every day. So it could be a very tough future, but I thought of just sitting down and writing about that, and writing about and then getting into the history of the stuff, which I really enjoy.
Is this where you write?
This is the monster. Yeah, this is, we write right in.
That's an old school screen.
No, it's brand new to me.
Well, they make the flat screens now, just this
Yeah,
one.
Okay, well this is a monster though. This is what I need. I get my head up a couple inches from it. These are very old computers. This is the newest. It's probably about 6 years old. This might be 10. And this is basically doesn't work anymore, but I occasionally put everything in here to back it up. You got your printer and you got your fax. Let me show you how you write this. I would be reading in a book at the bedstand, say, let's take one of these books here, and let's take that big one, Dreadnought. You'd be reading something, okay, and so what you do is you put this, when you're reading it, put a little tag right here by it, it's underlined. And so then you come down here in the morning, and you take that the quotation, and you come over here and you write 2 or 3 paragraphs around it, and then you take it and put it into the text in the machine, and you take this over here, and you Xerox this page, and you Xerox with it the cover page so they know where it's from. Okay? So you Xerox this and staple the two together. Let me show you in here. And once you get those stapled, you put it in here. Let's take the chapter. This is August 1914. Okay, this is from Hillgruber's book, Germany and the Two World Wars, translated by William Kirby. And you've got here, you put that here and you staple these together. And you put these, the ones you use, I've got obviously three or four quotes in here I use, and I mark them in green. Then I put them in the files, and I send the files. My buddy comes down, he's a PhD from Maryland, Frank Mintz. He comes down and he picks up the files, or I will send them by mail, and you'll put those things in the files, and then he double checks to make sure I got all the punctuation exact, got the quotes exact, and then he'll send me back, and I'll send him also the Xerox copy of the thing, and he makes all these corrections, and I'll put the corrections in the machine and freeze them there, and then I'll send them back again. And you keep doing that, and he's been coming down for a couple of years, on Saturdays, say once a month, and we'll sit there and he'll say, I just read a biography of Ribbentrop, and he tends to agree with so-and-so, and just wonderful. You sit here for a couple of hours talking about this, talking about all this. It was just, frankly, I hated to give the book up. It was so much fun to write and work on. It was like, I think I've compared to writing a history book to a painting. At some point, you got to say, we're done. It's over. Turn the paper in. But then you find some other quote. You find information like Bill Bullitt, famous. I didn't know he'd walked out of Versailles, and he was a young guy as a part of the delegation. And I would have gotten that in and gotten his quote in. Hey, he was angry too, and strengthened the argument. So it's that's how it's all.
Do you do all your own typing and filing and?
I do all the typing, and I file them all here, but then I give him these files. Eventually, I send the files up to him, and I send by mail these things when I come down at night and clip them all together. I'll get a pile of them, and I'll send them, and I'll indicate what chapter file they're to go in, and I'll send up the new printed copy of the chapter and say, check all these, So here, you see you got the chapter titles here, Versailles and Saint-Germain. The Anglo-Japanese Treaty is the title there. Look at this. Must be 200 footnotes here. Backup. Some of these footnotes, don't have just one source. Some of them got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you'll find these guys are all trading the same footnotes. They're all doing the same. And I'll tell you, I'm much better than they are, because after you do the footnotes, I start reading the stuff. I say, wait a minute, that guy misquoted it. It's inexact, and you can. And we've been working on this so long that a lot of things pop up from these fellows.
Do you write in the morning or when?
Well, on the book, mainly I write at night, and I get up in the middle of the night. I read these books, and then I put the little tabs on, and I'll wake up at 3, and I'll say, let me get downstairs and get it into the machine. And you come down here, and you'll spend maybe 3 hours working on 4 or 5 paragraphs. You get in, you rewrite it, rework it, then you put it into the copy, and you move the copy around, then you say, perfect. And you go back to bed and sleep like a baby.
Pat Buchanan's most recent book is Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. To learn more about him and his books, visit buchanan.org.